Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on pre-segmenting marketing researchers. I'm Joe Ridholm, editor of Quirk's Marketing Research Review. Before we get started, just a few quick notes. A copy of the slide deck and a link to the recording of the event will be available after the webinar if you'd like to share the information with colleagues. And there will also be time for questions after the presentation, so feel free to submit questions as we go, and I'll do my best to get as many of them answered as we have time for. And then any questions that we don't get to today will be answered offline after we're through. Our hosts today are Nicole Klinkenbeard and Tim Hoskins. Tim is the Vice President of Client Relations at Quester, where he's played an active role in identifying and developing new products, designs, and software solutions to meet research needs across industries. And Nicole Klinkenbeard is the Director of Strategic Insights and has been with Quester for 12 years. She handles strategic research initiatives for Quester and develops new research designs using innovative approaches to help bring the voice of the customer to life and to help Quester meet the unique objectives of every client. And with that, I will hand things over to Tim. Take it away, Tim.
All right. Thank you, Joe. And I'd like to take a moment to thank every single person who's on the call. Sharing an hour with us today, we greatly appreciate it. The presentation itself will take probably about 30-35 minutes, and we want to leave plenty of time for questions. The other thing I wanted to do, just real quick, is also thank everyone who participated in the actual interview through the Quirk's LinkedIn group. Without your participation and taking 15 minutes out of your day to provide us a glimpse inside of your reality, we wouldn't have been able to make this presentation today. So appreciate everyone's help on that. So we'll go ahead and get started. The first thing we want to do is give a brief, just 2-minute introduction about Quester as a company. Then we'll go into the actual process and how the technology works, how we apply it, and then finally we will hand the reins over to Nicole, and she will continue presenting the results, and that's what I'm sure everyone's excited to see. So a brief introduction on Quester. So company overview, we were Explorer Award finalists in 2012 for our post-segmentation deep dive product, where we interviewed hundreds of specific consumers on a specific segment to bring them to life, to bring their personas to life. What makes us unique is a proprietary interviewing software, which if you were able to take the interview, you experienced it. If not, we'll send a link out later once we get the final attendee list, and everyone will have an opportunity to participate. And then on the back end, we have a software analytics technology that helps us speed up the process by being able to condense large quantities of data. We conduct our research online or via mobile, and we have multilingual interviewing capabilities as well. Companies know us for big qual. We hear a lot about big data and having mass amounts of data available to us at our fingertips through social media. What we do is big qualitative, and that is being able to interview hundreds, if not thousands, of consumers and collect qualitative data centered around context. We also create designs that are both qualitative and quantitative, or quali-quant in nature, that injects many qualitative interviews within quantitative-based studies. And then finally, the mobile piece, which I won't spend too much time on. And then finally, the quantified qualitative analysis. Because we have a lot of data, we're able to quantify the ideas, and Nicole will actually highlight most of that in the reporting, which you'll see. So let's go to the process and talk a little bit about how we developed this study. So the software moderator we created in 2001 was leveraged in the interview pre-segmenting market researchers. Everyone experienced a qualitative-based interview, and the interview was actually conducted by our software moderator. Every interview is conducted one-on-one, and they're conducted simultaneously with real-time probing based on that natural language of the respondent. So we design a discussion guide like a human moderator would, but we drop it into our software interviewing platform, and the software interviewing platform then delivers the questions, understands the natural language of that respondent by applying a technology that's identifying words and categorizing them, whether it's a verb, a noun, a pronoun, etc. And then applying a spatial recognition algorithm to group and identify the key ideas that are being said. From there, we use that language to follow up with a probing question. where necessary. So that allows us to conduct large-scale qualitative with quantitative sample sizes. In addition to that, once we have the actual data, we apply a process that's 75% linguistics, humans actually conducting the analysis, and about 25% proprietary text analytics software. Our text analytics software allows us to condense that large quantity of data in a very short period of time. It identifies the key ideas using dictionaries and a built-in algorithm, and our analysts then read those key ideas and understand what's going on within the mass data. They then build custom code frames and continually to refine that to understand the main themes, also the outliers, and the interconnections within the data, and you'll see that in the actual reporting. So finally, the process. For those of you who did not participate in the interview, what we did is we partnered with Quirks, and we designed an interview that really talked about why market research. What are your motivations? What are your drivers? How do you select innovative technologies, so on and so forth. And people opted in through a link, through the LinkedIn panel, and once they completed that, they were then, all the interviews were collected, and Nicole and the team conducted their analysis. And that is what we are presenting today. So without further ado, I'll hand the reins over to Nicole, and we will present the findings.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming today. So at the point where we started analysis on this project, we ended up with 264 marketing research professionals. So as Tim said, thank you very much for your response and participation in this project. It was a fun topic for us to explore, and I hope the results are fun for you as well. So here you can kind of see where we ended up with sample breakdown, fairly even split between males and females, years of experience, as well as a fairly decent distribution on company size as well. But with further ado, I'm just going to dive right into the actual findings. So the question, is there a normal marketing researcher? It's actually an interesting question on many levels, especially when we're talking about segmentation. But the answer really is yes, and there are patterns that revolve around why we love our job, how we tackle the research process. So some of these ideas are probably not a huge surprise. Many of us are drawn to the field, or at least stay in the field. I should say that it was interesting, the large number of people who kind of fell into this industry and determined it was something they really loved. So that was interesting. But many of us are drawn to the field because of the problem-solving aspect. 50% in an unaided conversation feel that they are problem solvers, either naturally or, the extent that it really fits what they love to do. They love to solve problems, and this is part of what they love about their jobs, whether that be solving the big picture objectives or even on a more process-oriented scale, designing a guide or a survey that can get to those objectives. So it's really at each stage of the research process, there is that need for problem solving, and that's one of the things marketing researchers love. On a related note, 69% really enjoy thinking through that research process and playing with ideas that can ultimately impact the success of each project. 79% are at least open to new methodologies. So marketing researchers really do want to be innovative. They want to increase their knowledge and increase the effectiveness of the field. 73% of market researchers are motivated by the fact that they can make a difference, that we can have an impact on some level, with our clients, with their business issues, etc. And I think the most wonderful thing that we discovered is really just how passionate marketing researchers are about their jobs. It was really overwhelming. It was more than just, I like my job, it's a paycheck and that sort of thing. It's really a passion. I love what I do, and it really has a strong relation to the things that they like in general, things that fit their personality, etc. So they talk about loving what they do. It's a natural fit with the things they enjoy. And ultimately, it's this passion and where this passion lies that distinguishes the market researchers from one another. So if we look at more regarding where their passion lies, you see here are the ideas that marketing research talked about in an open-ended discussion about what they loved about their jobs. Some talk more about the more process-oriented steps like actually designing researchers, talking with consumers. You can see some of the verbatims here, questionnaire design and analysis. It's the basis of quant work. You get the right people in the screener. You have the questions worded correctly so you can uncover exactly what the client is after. I love focus group sessions, engaging with respondents in the field. I always have a passion every day. I go to work because I love my job. People are actually really loving the process-oriented aspects of their job. Then you start to get more into that idea of digging deeper, the problem-solving aspect of understanding consumer thought flow and the psychology behind decision-making. This is more about the analytic process and finding really those answers and insights. You can see I love finding out why, digging around to find the answers and presenting this in a way that influences people, understanding people, theory at work, etc. And then you take that a step further and it becomes even more about the client, making impacts with the results of the project, or even further, wanting to play that partner role, playing a role in impacting business strategy for their clients, communicating the underlying insights from research to those people who have to make a business decision, also influencing how those business decisions are made. Market research is more than simply delivering data. And also, there is certainly this love for the variety of work, right? No 2 days are the same. We get to explore many different products, issues, situations, so it keeps things that much more fun on a daily basis. So the actual segments. So as we talked about, marketing researchers really do have a strong passion, and where this passion lies is really what distinguishes these segments, and it impacts how they tackle projects and how they address client needs. So digging into the first one here, the mechanics. These are people that really love the more process-oriented aspects of their jobs, the designing research, talking to respondents, digging into the data. And where the problem solving comes in here is at each stage of the research process. So getting objectives and designing a guide or a survey that addresses those objectives, making sure we understand the consumer, their thoughts, so we can address those objectives. Now, their motivation lies more close to home, if you will. It's more of a personal passion to excel and to do a great job for their company. Now, discoverers are basically just that. They want to discover, and they love the quest for understanding. It's understanding how consumers make decisions, what influences their thought process, and kind of that whole idea of what makes them tick. So their motivation is driven by the discovery that they can find those golden nuggets and provide the knowledge to really understand the consumer to help their clients. Okay, so you're starting to get more of a focus on I'm doing what I love so I can help my clients. Now the strategists take that client focus even a step further. They're even more big picture focused. They're about developing a partnership and striving to be part of that client team. They're really focusing on how the research will be used strategically to solve business issues. So therefore, their motivation is driven really by the impact they can have on clients' business issues, business objectives. So if you look at these segments and overlay those ideas regarding where their passion lies, you can actually see where these shifts start to occur. So you see the mechanics are focused more heavily on those research process, designing, interviewing, analysis, and where the discoverers are about that love for the hunt and insights and truly understanding decisions. So they're more focused on that end result, but they're not quite thinking as much beyond that project, where strategists are always thinking that far ahead. The desire to impact business strategy significantly increases for those strategists as you move from 13 to 20 to 63% through those segments. So let's dive a little bit deeper into each of these profiles, starting with the mechanics. So if you look at this data by years of experience, the mechanics do tend to be earlier in their careers. And as we talked about, they tend to love the more process-oriented aspects of their job. They look at if you look at the language, the things like planning the approach and crunching the numbers is what I love, working out a plan. I love to play with numbers and tell a story with them. They also tend to be more science-oriented and more quant-focused than the other two groups. Numbers are everything. Give me a representative sample of 400 and I can find out what you need to know. They do want to be more innovative on some level when it comes more to designing research, but because they're very science-focused, they also tend to be a bit more skeptical than the other two segments. In addition, some really do feel limited by their situation when it comes to innovation. I try to be the best in my field, maybe too much. I'm innovative, but I usually get stopped by the company's managers. Now, when you look at how this mindset impacts their approach to research and client needs, mechanics tend to think of things on a more project-by-project basis. They certainly have objectives in mind, but tend to focus first on the more concrete aspects like budget, sample, timeline. If you look at their language here, budget, what's the least amount of sample and labor to deliver some result that will at least partly answer the question asked. Getting a representative sample is the most important factor. And you'll see here in a moment how that compares to the other two segments. So the discoverers, they are more spread throughout the years of experience. They are more qualitative focused because of that love for understanding the consumer mind and how people make decisions and what influences that decision-making process. I'm a student of consumers, how they think, what influences them, and how they make decisions. Analyzing the behaviors and psychologies of people. No two persons are identical. They're influenced by their upbringings and different surroundings. So no information is the same, and information in different contexts will mean different things. As I mentioned, they're more driven by the discovery of anything new, whether that be insights, innovation as it relates to new methodologies, which they are more likely to be earlier adopters, and they aren't afraid to try new things. So when they're thinking about new methodologies, they're actually seeking out that information, and they're more likely to be the ones to pilot that new methodology. If you look at some of the language there, constant flow of new information. That constant new flow of information that keeps me amazed, keeps them engaged. I always like to learn new things and push the boundaries of what I do. I like to be innovative in my work, and I like thinking outside the box. I hate routine and numbers for the sake of numbers. Now, the research process, discoverers are thinking beyond really that research process and focusing on the big picture and the insights that they can provide to their clients. So I see myself as more than a researcher. I love to see change driven by real insight. I tend to look at myself as working in insight rather than market research. Anything that can better help my clients understand their audiences and markets they're working in, I see as part of my role. So you're starting to see that transition beyond looking at just delivering data. They focus more on objectives. Budget and timelines obviously play a role, but they're less willing to sacrifice insights, or at least in the ideal world. The method must be able to address the objective issues of the research, or else it is useless. So looking at the strategist profile, they do tend to have more experience in the industry, and this is really what gives them the ability to play more of that consultant role and have a partnership with the client. So taking it to the next step, our job does not stop when we have the results of the research. We need to take it to another step and partner with clients to help them take it to the next level. Understanding more about business strategy, communing with the client's marketplace. So it's beyond the issues of that particular research project. They do think of themselves as a leader and a mentor because they do have that experience and they want to play that role. My researcher role is a base. I'm also a consultant, facilitator, coach, educator, mentor, manager, leader, and counselor. They do feel they're innovative. They strive to find better ways to make impacts with their research. They're trying to connect the dots to best explain the results, determine what the results actually mean and how they can be used strategically. So, as I mentioned, strategists are really about that relationship, being a partner so they think beyond the objectives to the business issues at hand. How those results will be used is one of their first concerns in the research process. The most important factor is how the client is planning to use the results. During discussion of how results will be used, it becomes obvious they really need something different or something different will be more helpful to them. So again, you start to see more of that consultant factor coming out. What will be done with the results? What decisions need to be made, etc. So those are the details within each of the individual segments, and I hope that gives you a sense of what is distinguishing the mindsets within each of these segments. The rest of this information is more fun fact that relates to the industry, but also sheds a little bit more light on each of these segments. So this slide represents kind of the openness to new methodologies. This was from an open-ended discussion regarding new methodologies. So the numbers you see here, again, are quantified results of a qualitative question. So as you can see here, the discoverers are more likely to be those early adopters, as I mentioned. They tend to be the ones who pilot new methodologies. And this curiosity is more self-driven, so they're actually seeking out this new information. Of course, I'm open to innovation, innovate or die. I only consider what the client needs are, not my comfort zone. If something is outside my comfort zone, I pilot it. I learn if it's useful. So they're seeking it out and they're trying it. Now, you go to that next level, and these people are more cautiously open. They consider new methodologies, but only after it has been more widely adopted, right? So they describe themselves as cautiously optimistic about new methodologies. I like to see that some previous studies have validated the new methodologies. So they're open, but they're really not those people to pilot things and really seek it out. Now, you also have those folks, roughly around 9% of the overall sample, where this is where mechanics tend to peak a little bit more compared to the other two segments. They're more likely to be more uncomfortable with new methodologies and to some extent more likely to only consider them if it's more client-driven. So I really prefer using what I know. I tend to only use a new methodology if a client requests it. Now, one other thing I wanted to point out here is there is a sense of frustration. Some really do feel restricted within their current situation, whether that be by their position and they don't feel that they can be innovators, whether that be driven by their company and they feel that their company is not open to trying new things and they're set in their ways, or maybe it's their client base, that their clients are more interested in what has worked. So I like new methodologies. I'm interested in mobile, for example, and social media research, but my company is not. Trying to test new methodologies is not a priority here. Now, this information is interesting. It's about work personalities, and this is from a close-ended question. And as you'll see here, as we move through these segments, we become more confident and are less stressed about our responsibilities. So you see, the mechanics tend to be more reserved and are more driven by daily routine. I prefer routine. I get nervous easily. They tend to be more quiet, and they're less likely to feel like they're innovative or generate a lot of enthusiasm. The discoverers, if you remember, are all about digging into the data, playing with ideas. So they're really into that idea of figuring out the story. I like to reflect and play with ideas. Now the strategists are all about that thinking ahead, planning, and they have more confidence to inspire people. I generate a lot of enthusiasm. I like to make plans and follow through. So you can kind of see how their views on their overall work personality somewhat fit within each of those segments. Now, again, the purpose of this research was as a pre-segmentation to inform a larger scale full segmentation project. So if you look at the overall conversations we had within this research, some additional statements to add to a more full segmentation approach regarding the work personality are listed here. Things like being a team player, loving problem solving, very strategic, trying to understand people and the way they think, thinking outside the box, those sorts of things. Also, what motivates you at work? You can see here as we move through the segments, we're eager to gain more experience so we can truly impact our clients and make a difference. You'll see here with these first two that making a difference and the experience that we gain increases as we move through those three segments. And again, some additional statements giving the scale of the conversation that we had, what motivates them at work, the people they work with. There's a large sense of collaboration and a team approach to how they approach research, the variety in learning new things, the thrill of having an impact, the relationship with clients, etc. Another kind of fun fact is why is understanding how people think and feel important. So we did ask people, which is more interesting to you, knowing how people think or how people feel. And it came out, obviously, fairly even. So 52% about feel and 48% about think. And one thing I wanted to address here, because I did see in the data that there was some pushback, I shouldn't say some, it was a little pushback from some people about why we force them to choose. And part of that is driven by our mindset that the way you ask a question often frames the answer. We knew going into this question that both feeling and thinking are important in the industry. And so we figured if we give them the option to choose both, we're not going to get the insights that we want relative to why. Because even if we allow them to pick both are equally important and follow up with that why, you're more likely to get the more simplistic answers relative to the idea of both. They're both important, they're too interrelated to separate. But when we force people to choose, analytically we can still tease out that both are equally important, plus we get the richness of their thought process. If you look at some of these quotations here, buyers make choices which are initially filtered by what they think, but their ultimate decisions are made by what they feel. So you see that both are important, but this person is on the feel end of the spectrum. I believe feelings cause thoughts and then cause actions. However, feelings are more complicated and difficult to capture. But what people think can indicate how they feel. So similar, but this person is more in the think camp. So we can kind of understand that whole thought process and teasing both of those out. And additionally, we can see that as we gain more experience, the value of how people feel becomes more meaningful. So as you see here, when in those earlier years of experience, 0 to 6, they're more think-oriented. And as we move through that years of experience, we start to get more value in terms of how people feel. So that's kind of an interesting way to display and answer why we ask the question that way. Now this was kind of another fun fact, and this was the intention of our we wanted to make this interview somewhat exciting and also be able to address the objectives of our research as well. And one of the things we asked was, what did you want to be when you grow up? It was an open-ended discussion, and an interesting fact is that obviously market research requires a higher degree of analytic skills and also creative skills in a means to present the findings in a meaningful way that communicates the power of the findings in a way that that our clients can understand. And so it's interesting that the science and creative fields were the two top professions mentioned. You can see the language here, and I love this one because it explains the thought process in great detail. They're talking about wanting to be in the legal profession because providing final answers, a yes-no response. But as I grew older, I saw the world more in terms of grays than in black and white, and that led me to want to understand how and why people make decisions. So it's interesting how that innate understanding of people and problem solving transitioned through some people's growing up years into their professional careers. And also, if you look at this by segment, again, just kind of an interesting fact, mechanics were more likely to want to be in some sort of creative profession, and maybe that ties to the idea that, these are the people that really liked the process-oriented things like designing research, where strategists on the other end of the spectrum were more likely to want to be a teacher, and they loved the problem-solving aspects. So as you recall, they do think of themselves as leaders and influencers. So kind of some fun facts to wrap things up. And I'm actually going to turn it back over to Tim for closing remarks, and then we can dive into some questions.
Thank you, Nicole. Very good. We wanted to go ahead and let everybody again know who may have joined us a little bit late that we are going to give everyone the opportunity to take this interview if you haven't already. When we, in probably Monday or Tuesday, we'll be sending out an email that will include the qualitative link, the interview with our software-based moderator, so that you can interact with within the interview and understand some of the questions that we ask. It was about 60 to 75% qualitative, and then we'll also email the presentation and a link to the recording. So once again, thank you so much for those of you who participated, and for those of you who are joining us and looking at the results for the first time and haven't. We look forward to seeing some of your feedback. So I would love to maybe have Joe see what type of questions that we have and spend plenty of time answering those.
Sure. We've had a number of people ask about the breakdown between client side and vendor side in terms of the respondents. Do you have any rough percentages on which groups they came from?
Yeah, it was roughly 60-40, I believe.
So 60.
I'm sorry, 40 client side.
Gotcha. We had a question here again. For someone who didn't take the interview, can you just do a quick overview of how the process works to give a flavor of how how the findings came about?
Absolutely. So the quick process is we first, our research team creates a questionnaire or discussion guide. Once that is created, we drop that into our software-based moderator. The software-based moderator has the ability to understand the natural language through a built-in algorithm and probe based on the key ideas that are being brought up within their response. Then we're also adding an extra layer of intelligence onto each interview or study project, so that it's proprietary to that specific study. And if certain ideas are brought up, like a human moderator would, we will probe appropriately. And we call that targeted probing. So once we have everything programmed, we drop that into the Quarks LinkedIn group, and an email was sent out. Each person had the ability to click on the link, interact with the software one-on-one, and then on the back end, we closed the survey down and then conducted analysis on the text analytics, or on the text itself. We have a process that's 75% human linguistic based and 25% software based. The overall analysis of what you saw here and roughly 250 interviews. Took us about 1 week for the top-line executive summary, and then an additional week where we went in and started really quantifying some of the ideas.
And I wanted to add, getting into more of kind of the design in terms of how we approached the questionnaire and translated that into these segments. Just some background on kind of the overall flow of the discussion. The first part of the discussion was about we started with the fun aspect of what they wanted to be when they grew up, and went into what led them to be interested in the market research industry and what motivates them. And part of the reason I wanted to mention this is because I see the comment about, I wonder how many people fell into the industry randomly versus intentionally, and that's actually a great question, and that's part of why we added had that conversation about getting into the industry and stuff. And I would say that the overwhelming majority did fall into the industry from one way or the other. From even if it was in college and or an internship, and a piece of that internship revolved around marketing research, and they fell in love with it at that point, versus starting at a career and somehow within that company moving in more to consumer insights or marketing research, whatever it may be. So that's an interesting question. And then we went more into the decision-making process relative to, it started with what they loved about their job, the decision-making process about designing research, a discussion about innovation, their personality, and that sort of thing, and some additional close-ended questions to give some more flavor to these folks and their mindset.
I had a couple questions along these lines too. Can you just talk about the process of forming the segments? I mean, was that based on the qualitative feedback and the answers, or was there, how did you come up with the mechanics and the various segment names?
Yeah, I'll tackle that. So basically what happens is we're combing through the data and determining what those links in their mindset are. So we're going through the qualitative discussion as a whole and determining, okay, this is the thought flow of marketing researchers, and weaving in, what they're loving about their job and these sort of things. So we're first identifying what those different patterns are, what those thought flows are, and then whittling it down from that point and really looking at, okay, what is distinguishing these people, or what is driving these differences from that qualitative conversation. And because we're probing in this conversation for more information, we can really start to understand the reasons why behind their thought process and their feelings and that sort of thing. So ultimately, that was the starting point for developing these segments. And then once we had an idea of kind of where these segments were going, is where that quantitative information comes in, and that being cutting by a number of different variables and factors to determine and really hone in and refine these segments. So the quantitative information becomes support for those qualitative insights relative to what is truly defining these segments.
Were you able to identify any significant differences in the profiles between the client-side researchers and the supplier-side people?
We did not dig into that at this point, but that's something that I have been, purely from an interesting perspective, something that I intend to look into.
Sure. One of the findings in there talked about people's nervousness about exploring new methods, and I was wondering if you, either both of you could talk with some strategies of how, researchers who are looking at, bringing in sort of newer techniques into their companies or trying some things out, any things they can do to sort of smooth the path, internally to kind of make it easier for them to do that and explore some new methods.
Absolutely. Our technology is rather innovative and unique. We would like to think so, and in talking with a lot of our clients who technology is coming out every single day to help market researchers. And the one thing that we always stress is to look at case studies. but also try to experience the technology yourself through a demonstration, and then finally talk to their clients. Really dig in to understand how did they apply it. What are the things that they learned? What would they change about that the next time? And really lean on each other in the industry. We saw that a lot of, we want to talk to other people who have done that. And I think that every technology that's out there right now has a base set of customers who have experienced that. And I think relying upon their expertise is extremely valuable.
And this also might have been answered a little bit by the presentation, but can you talk about some of the types of insights you can get with this kind of approach? I mean, it seems like a lot of it is sort of a nice emotional/psychological picture that you can paint of the audience who's done the study. But can you talk about some of the types of insights that you can get from this kind of work?
Absolutely. A lot of our work is spread out throughout the research life cycle, so we don't necessarily apply this on one specific area. We're used a lot for innovation and understanding the guide rails to innovation and creating those specific lines in the sand where the consumers come back and say, an idea way out in the clouds isn't going to fit with us. But by talking to hundreds, if not thousands, of the consumers and talking about their need states as well as their ideas, as well as giving some early innovation concepts for them to react to, that's a very important part of our business and something that a lot of organizations come to us for. We do a lot of this is the pre-segmentation, but where we were finalists for the Explorer Award with Frito-Lay, it's digging down deep into the post-segmentation. So whether it's bringing a specific persona or segment to life to enhance the marketing message or the strategy on how to connect with that segment, that's something that people are coming to us quite a bit. Path to purchase. I think that every single organization is talking about this, reading about this, discussing this. We qualitatively interview hundreds, or if not thousands again, people individually and have them talk to us about their specific paths so that we can then identify the different paths, tributaries people are taking so that we can strengthen the phase two quantitative. Concept optimization, another important one. I think that we all understand the importance of quantitative. Our clients, what they do is they inject many qualitative conversations on the back end to ultimately tease out some of those. Okay, you said that your purchase intent or your believability is X, but why? Let's really dig into that, and then that way they can help strengthen the case or make changes. So those are just a few of the areas that we get into. But again, I think, like you said, we're always looking for the emotional connection with the functional connection.
And I think it's a combination of kind of our overall approach to interviewing, which is based on psychiatric interviewing, which is kind of, I think, part of the root of the question regarding, the emotional aspects and the psychological aspects of the thought process, and tying that in with the back end of the way we approach analysis from a linguistic and semiotic perspective. And so we're really focused as well on the language and how that language represents their thought flow and that sort of thing. So, a lot of the work we do also focuses on anything communication-oriented. As Tim mentioned, concept optimization, message development, positioning. So anything that really, gets us to the point of, understanding the thought flow, how people think, what influences how they think, etc. Funny, because that fits within one of the segments.
This was a good one. It wasn't a question, but it was a good comment. I thought somebody asked if it would be interesting to know if there's a difference in job satisfaction or career mobility among the various segments, and then also to look at if there's a progression through the segments as one becomes older and gains experience in the marketing research field. So that might be something you guys want to look at down the road.
Yeah, most definitely.
Absolutely. And then the other thing about this is that it'd be always fun to have work with an organization that specializes in segmentation, and we're kind of talking to one right now to see what would a true segmentation on the market research industry to look like. from a quantitative standpoint of view, taking the findings that we learned from this study and applying them in a phase 2. So that's an interesting point there.
Do you have any thoughts after doing this? Not that you're experts on assembling a marketing research team, but just based on the various segmentations, the discoverers, mechanics, strategists. Do you have any thoughts on what mix you would want to have in your sort of ideal marketing research department?
That's a tough question. I guess it depends on. Well, I guess it depends on the focus of that particular organization and what industry they work within. I think that those later two segments. I suppose that my honest feeling would be more of a blend, shifting more probably to that middle discoverers segment, simply because of that quest for knowledge, and they're doing everything they can to figure out, what makes people tick. Whether that be from a quantitative or a qualitative perspective. You also have those mechanics who certainly play a heavy role in their focus in the design perspective, right? And the more tactical areas, if you will. And those strategists are certainly important. Maybe, they're more of your probably higher level researchers, maybe director level, that sort of thing, but they certainly represent that larger focus, which I think is what many organizations are after these days with, their marketing research partners. It's less about a vendor and more about a partnership, that your vendors, your partners, have that knowledge to really play a larger role in their team. So it's kind of an integration of the client side and the vendor side, and really taking the marketing research industry that much further, if you will.
Sure, absolutely. And to build on what Nicole was saying, I think one of my favorite elements of the job is sitting among a team of market researchers, and obviously based on their company and their objectives, things are always changing. But the interesting thing is how everyone kind of approaches a problem. And what I've found when working with companies that are extremely successful is the ability for those discoverers to bring out and kind of push forward with new technology, but at the same time, they have a great working relationship with those strategists and those mechanics to make sure that they're choosing the right methodology for that actual research objective. The technology may be flashy, but at the end of the day, they have to make sure that they're getting the most optimal results, or the best results, for their stakeholders. So, like Nicole said, a blend of all three is ideal, and it's fun to actually watch it play out within organizations, and I'm sure everyone on the phone sees that on a consistent basis.
I had just one more here, too, and again, you sort of might have touched on it during the presentation, but in looking at the findings and putting everything together, were there any surprises or anything that kind of jumped out at you that you weren't expecting?
I don't think it was necessarily anything that jumped out that we weren't expecting, but I'll reiterate, I really was surprised. We didn't ask a job satisfaction question, but when you look at the discussions that we had with these folks, it's getting back to that passion. There really is a high level of passion in the industry, and I think that, for lack of a better word, I think it's great. It says something about our industry and the abilities that we have and the impact that we can have. I mean, I think the more impact you can have, the greater meaningfulness of your job. So I think that was probably the most interesting, that most people just weren't answering questions and talking about what they do every day and how they decide things, but it was really their language. It was I love, or I really enjoy, or just the sense of passion they have about what they do.
I think we've covered all the questions. I don't know, Tim and or Nicole, did you have any other closing comments to make?
No, we did see one here, though, maybe that somebody asked, and they asked, and I'd be interested because, Nicole, we haven't talked about that. And where do you and I fit? I don't know. I didn't answer the polling question, and I haven't I haven't even asked you, so I'll let you go first. I'm going to ask you, where do you fit in the 3 segments?
I would say I am in between the discoverer and the strategist. And I think what I love about what we do as a company and what I get to do for our company is that understanding what makes people tick. And that's the foundation of what we do. I think it's, that psychological perspective and how that translates into our clients' business needs. But, part of my role and part of what I love is playing that strategist and being that partner. I think in all my relationships with clients, that's what I strive for. I don't want to be a vendor. I don't want to do a project here, do a project there. I really crave that relationship aspect of it, and I suppose it's the emotional part, feeling like I'm making a difference on some level. And you, Tim?
Oh, that's a tough one. I think that I'm very similar. I would say I'd lean more to the discover, but the part about our jobs and one thing that I love most is thinking 2 to 3 years out, and how the potential activation of the results from a potential study is going to impact the business, 2 to 3 years out, as well as the macroeconomic changes that are occurring, as well as how social media is changing our world. So I love innovation. I love that discovery, but always thinking in the future as well as and how it will impact the overall business.
Well, that's great. Thanks. Thanks Tim and Nicole and Quester for all of your time today and all the work that went into this, and thanks to everybody who attended. We hope you found the information interesting and helpful. I know I thought it was very interesting. So with that, we'll wrap it up and say thanks and enjoy the rest of your day.